Welcome, everybody, to the show. Tonight, we are talking about SPI. This is Counter Clipping show number 88 for August 29th, 2022. Maybe I'll have more money in 2029. That'd be awesome. Tonight, we are drinking. We have a new card up now. We are drinking the Singleton of Glendullan Until It's Gone, which won't be tonight. And we are clipping 1813, Napoleon's Nemesis from Europa Simulazione, which we might finish tonight. I'm not sure if it depends, how tired my hand gets after an hour or so. So we're going to talk about SPI stuff. So before we get started, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can do that. You're supporting the channel just being here. So that is all much appreciated. So thank you for that. And if you'd like to help us out with super chats or super stickers, it will help to get your comment highlighted as well, so I don't miss it, which I am known to do, especially when there's like 120 plus people in the chat. And we're already doing pretty good, and we haven't even been going for a minute yet. So before we get started, let me say hello to... get this going. Six Actual, Achilles, Alan Salazar, Andrew Franca, Brian Jarvis, Chad Kennedy, Christopher Press, David Imperato, David Zell, Ed Holtzman, Iggy Cricktal, Ed Meister, Eric Hansen, Fucko is in the house, Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Wesovich, Jeffrey Edwards, John Longshore is here, John Stanley, John Clark, Lee Grant was here for a second, but they dropped him off the list for some reason. Carl Creeder from the Wargame Bootcamp, Kilroy was here, Lee Grant is back, Lind Pratt from sunny Central Ohio, Mac Daddy, Manders, Michael Kirk, Mike Anthony, Paul O'Farrell, Rob Johnson, Robert Moffat, Stigler is in the house. I got something for you, Stigler. Give us a second and we will show it off. Vince C., Vince Ree, and William Boardman. Apologize if Henry Sikorsky also in the house now. The YouTube feature that tells me who's in the chat is sometimes, by sometimes I mean all the time, fairly flaky. So sorry if I've missed you. If we will mention your comments as they show up. So let's get back over here. I'm going to put the banner up. We don't have a very good banner this week, but some banner is better than no banner, right? So tonight we're going to talk about SPI, but let me talk about what's going on first of all, which will segue us into the wargaming news. John C. from the sunny Philippines. Welcome back. Hopefully it is sunny over there again today. So we have started playing Last Blitzkrieg, Dean Essig design from, I was going to say the gamers, but the gamers / multi-man / however we want to call it these days. We do like it so far, but we've played 2 sessions. We're going a little bit slow right now, but it's picking up. It's like noticeably picked up as of last turn. And we are enjoying it so far, but we have not yet finished. Joe Perez, welcome back. Nels Lindquist, welcome to the stream. Ooh, Nels got boned on the lifetime membership, I'm afraid. So sorry about that. So anyway, Charles Latorre, hopefully I'm glad that you are happy with Grey Rooster LLC. I've had very good luck with them. I should be in the correct camera position here. So let me just make a tiny adjustment so that the clipping card does not hover over my face, which you might all enjoy better, actually, now that I think about it. So we've started playing Last Blitzkrieg. I am still working on the outline for Pacific War. As I mentioned last week, there's a couple other play things that are going to happen before that that is ready to be filmed. But one of the things I have to remember this week is to bring home the copy of Pacific War. So I'm going to disagree with you on that, Brian Jarvis, but there's some nuance to that opinion. So let me move this dumb thing over here. I think it'll work better over here than it will over there. That way, because I'm a little more comfortable and a little more positioned to be over here. So let's fix that. So anyway, wargaming news. So one of the wargaming news pieces is obviously Constant World Expo is occurring right now in Tempe, Arizona. We'll have pictures in just a moment. The other thing is something I did not expect in any sense to be bringing you this evening, and that is NWS news. Unfortunately, the news isn't that NWS is about to be resurrected in any way. What we do have is a press release from Matrix Games, who will be bringing out Rule the Waves 3. This was one of, I think, a couple different digital games that NWS had released over the years. For those who enjoyed it, and it was popular enough that there's some people that made YouTube videos about it. So William Boardman's GMT shipment was delayed by a train derailment. That's something else, let me tell you. That is some karmic payback for something you did in a previous life, apparently. So Rule the Waves 3 is expected to be released by Matrix Games in collaboration with Naval Wargaming Services sometime in Q1 2023. So if you're interested in that, and it is very much I mean, I've only seen Rule the Waves 2. Maybe they'll completely overhaul the graphical interface. And by graphical interface, I mean Excel spreadsheet that Rule the Waves 2 boasted. So check that out if you're interested. I think all of us probably, at least a lot of us, probably do have Matrix games on our radar, even if we don't necessarily play a ton of them, which is pretty much where I'm at. So I did not expect to be bringing you that news. That was passed along to me earlier today through the kindness of the Armchair Dragoons. Their website is the events calendar at the bottom there. So before we get to the SPI business, let me pull up the other slideshow that I have today. And I didn't actually set any of this up in advance because everything was too busy. Window. There we go. So I got my roving reporter at the Consim World Expo has brought us some pictures. Unfortunately, my cell phone provider, which is, by the way, now Spectrum rather than Verizon, because Verizon was boning me to the tune of $80-some a month. I mean, that wasn't the bill. That was the amount I was getting overcharged. So we went to Spectrum. We will be saving $120 a month. Now, we'll see how the service holds out. I mean, we did have generally good service with Verizon. There was a reason why we stayed with Verizon as long as we did, but I would sure like to not pay $183 a month for 2 lines on cell phone service. So things on tables and some other stuff from the Consim World Expo. So first we have a game from the Tactical Workshop. This is not something I'm familiar with. This is called 1811 Albuera. And this is the map to that. It looks pretty interesting. So I will be doing a wee bit of investigation on this, I think. And I am absolutely behind on the comments here. So sorry about that. We'll get to the SPI stuff very shortly. So next up, we have, this is the flea market. So they started out with 2 rows of tables, and they had to expand it to 3 rows of tables. So the Consim World Expo flea market looks like it's doing real well. Unfortunately, most of the pictures from the flea market did not turn out. They were tiny thumbnail-sized thumbnails. So we didn't really get anything good. Well, there might be 1 or 2 of them in here. We'll see. I went and scoured it so that we wouldn't have terrible pictures. But there's some good-looking stuff in there. This looks like, I'm not sure what these guys are playing, actually, but it's right by the flea market table, which then expanded to 3 rows of tables. So that appears to be bustling. This is Great Battles of the American Civil War, the Battle of the Wilderness. So we I think got some inklings that this was in the works, and I think these are obviously playtest counters. So we are now looking at GBACW Wilderness, which hopefully will be out Thursday. Would be fabulous. Here's some of the OCS guys waiting to get set up. This is the line of communication map from this game, which we don't have a great picture of. This is 1985 Sacred Oil from Thin Red Line Games, and it looks pretty good on a table, shockingly. So, and by shockingly, I mean that sarcastically. I think the game looks pretty good. There's some 1985 Under Iron Sky photos coming here as well. So this is 1914 Nach Paris, or To Paris, or Toward Paris, or something like that. This is a game by Bertrand Meunier. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but we're doing our best here. This is from VUCA Simulations. This is their biggest game so far. It's about the early months of World War I on the Western Front, and it looks very interesting indeed. Speaking of VUCA Simulations, a second unboxing from them will be out on Thursday. Their game Crossing the Line, which looks even better than Donnerschlag, actually. Cyber Field Marshal, welcome to the stream. Thanks for coming by. So next up, we have, this is Nach Paris as well. It looks like we might have something over there from somebody as well. But the map looks nice. I think this is out already. If it is out, it has come out pretty recently. This is the OCS team setting up the massive Ostfront game, which we'll have another picture of here in a minute. This is Thunder in the East, a Frank Chadwick production, now taken over by GMT. This is the of course Victory Point Games version. This is a sort of a shot of Tony Burkett and some other guys who are preparing to play. You don't see any counters on here anymore, so I think this was probably Friday of the big Ostfront. Now Ostfront, so I'll go over this again. Ostfront is 4 games put together, one of which is the pretty small one-map Crimea game, but the other 3 are the Third Winter, which is out, and then Forgotten Battles, and which is the sector opposing Army Group Center, and the Hero City, which is the sector opposing, I was going to say Army Group North, but I'm not 100% sure that it was called Army Group North at that point, but it's the sector that includes Leningrad and an awful lot of really bad terrain. Ostfront is the effort to play all 3 of those together. I believe, based on information I got before the convention, that they are playing the January 1944 scenario. The game runs from September 1943 to, I think, April or May of 1944. So it's been like 2 months since we've played Third Winter. So, and because our guys are out there. So there's that. All right, here's some stuff that we did get from the flea market tables. We see a Psalm 1918, a Stonewall Jackson's Way, an original Stonewall Jackson's Way, and a Stonewall in the Valley, both awesome games. Rock of the Marne, which is supposed to be good, and Marne 1918. So we have a World War I and Civil War fest going on here. Here's the U.S. Civil War, the GMT version, very good game. Stylishly dressed gamers, as we can see here, hovering over the Ostfront effort. Lighting over there looks pretty good, which is absolutely essential. John C., thank you so much. Much appreciated. Looks like, let me scroll to make sure I haven't stiffed anybody else. So John got his big game shipment from his consignment service in the U.S., and they should have delivery by November 12th or so. GMT, Compass, Legion, and MMP. Awesome. It's always nice to, get new stuff. But it's even, I mean, on the one hand, it's nice to get more stuff. But on the one hand, you had to wait for it. So, I have a little bit mixed feelings about that. So over here we have, this is Ostfront. This is, looks like a German corps or so that has managed to get itself pocketed. So we'll see what happens with that. This and another photo later on here are shots of Napoleon's Last Gamble. This is going to be being played with one of the expansions, one or more of the expansions, which is, you put the whole thing together and it is eminently playable in an event as long as Console World Expo. You can probably play it twice. This is 1985 Under an Iron Sky. Not an incredibly awesome close-in view, but I think it's a nice looking game. I hope so. I paid a lot for it. Here's, 1985 Under an Iron Sky. This is back to 1811 Albuera, and that is all the photos I have from our friends we are all jealous of right now at the Console World Expo. So maybe there are folks at Console World Expo watching this stream right now. So if you are doing that, make sure to pipe up in the chat. I'd be super curious. Paul Farrell says his one and only SPI game is Star Force. So Star Force is an interesting game in a lot of ways. We'll talk about it in due course because it is on the list. So what I did was I pulled the top 50 rated SPI titles from Board Game Geek, and we'll kind of walk through those. Now, I am positive that there are a number of games on the best of list that are not on here, because some really quite well regarded games, surprisingly, not only didn't make the top 10, didn't make the top 20. So, and it's, it's Board Game Geek rankings, right? So it's not really a wargamers audience. Wargamers make up a distinct minority there. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here in the house. Thanks, Mo, for coming by. And I am gonna profusely apologize again for missing everybody here. We still haven't gotten the old book, all the bookshelves out of the old place, by the way. So the wall behind me is not yet set. I think what's going to happen, I think I did a video on this. I think half this wall is going to be RPG stuff and half the wall is going to be GMT stuff. I think that's how it's going to work. If it's not going to work like that, then I might do it the opposite way and pull everything else that's not GMT out into this room, and possibly OSG as well, because the other room does not have room for. The other room does not have space for OSG. It is basically at or very close to capacity already. So yeah, BGG. I mean, there's plenty of value in BGG for wargamers, right? But if you're expecting the BGG rating system to tell you much about war games, then I think you're barking up the wrong tree. So anyway, number 50, we're going to go in, bottom to top here, is Fighting Sail. Fighting Sail was, I believe, only released in the magazine format in S&T. I don't know what issue, and I don't know any of these issues, to be completely honest about it. But I can tell you that for folks, looking for a game of the era that's a little less bookkeepy and easier to play than Wooden Ships and Iron Men, some of those folks like Fighting Sail. Jim Ozarski has done Fighting Sail playthroughs using Tabletop Simulator on his channel. Number 49 is a game that would make probably my... So on the one hand, I feel like the science fiction and fantasy games really ought to be considered separately from the military history and hypothetical military situation games that SPI did. But on the other hand, I have 50 here. So, Cyber Field Marshal, boy, that's really going to depend. Those are all good games. I assume we're talking about the Decision Atlantic Wall rather than the SPI Atlantic Wall. Battle for Normandy is a very good game too, though. Greatest Day is a great game. I really like the Goss Atlantic Wall as well, but I mean, you got to you have to steel yourself to deal with Goss, right? So it's very heavy system. On the other hand, GTS, once you get the hang of the system, you'll hardly ever look at the rulebook again. So there's that, and you play the whole thing off the cards. I'm not sure how many S&T SPI games I have in the library at the moment. I think it's, counting S&Ts, I think that number's probably about 20. I have not done the calculation recently. So number 49 is a game that would probably make my top 5. That game is Outreach. I believe this was an Irad Hardy game. I only looked up the top 15 or 20 to verify who the designers were. But Outreach is a fabulous game. It's a completely unique game. There's really nothing else like it at all. It was included in the Star Force trilogy along with Star Force and Star Soldier. Star Force is an interesting game, and I mean something kind of specific when I say interesting. I mean that there are things in it that are neat, right? There are things in it that work well, but I'm not necessarily saying that I think that item is necessarily worth playing. I think Star Force is not particularly fun to play, but it's got some really neat elements to it. And that in this context, at least, is what I mean when I say interesting. Man, we're getting annihilated in the chat here. So keep that up, though. We are probably going to short the quads here because I didn't see a couple of them around this list, but some of them aren't. But some of the individual games are on the list, and we'll talk about those as they come up. Number 49 is Atlantic Wall. Atlantic Wall was I think in 1978, I want to say. I didn't look the dates up either for the bottom 25. That is a Joe Balkowski design. Joe Balkowski is the man of D-Day research, particularly when we're talking about the 29th Infantry Division. But Atlantic Wall is a very interesting game. I do have it. I haven't actually played it other than to kind of pull out the Omaha Beach scenario stuff and noodle around with it just a very little bit. So, but you can see, I think, the genesis there of the Goss system as it's not super obvious until you start actually looking at the two rules set side by side. Breitenfeld is on the list. We'll get to that. Number 46 is Patton's Third Army. This is one of the games in the Victory in the West system, which we will see more of on this list. It is the one with possibly one of the 2 or 3 worst covers that S&T magazine has ever had. I think it's a Howard Chaykin cover, who, if you don't know, is a pretty famous comic book artist, but man, he really, it just doesn't work in terms of what we would expect for S&T magazine covers, I'm afraid. So trying to catch up on the chat. BGG market is going to close on September 1st. I think there's going to be some kind of classifieds listing, was last I heard. They seem to be changing their mind every couple of days. At this point, I'm not monitoring that situation. So Charles Latour mentions the West Wall Quad, the Iron South Quad, Central Front, which didn't appear as a quad, but it is a series. Victory in the West also didn't appear as a quad, which is too bad because I'd love to have a 4th one in the series. Paratroop. Paratroop is 3 mini games in one magazine. And Paratroop was my very first war game, by the way. If I have mentioned that in the past, but possibly not recently. Number 45 is Star Force. Now, again, Star Force is, I think, it's got some really interesting ideas in it. It's got true 3-dimensional movement. It's plotted 3-dimensional movement, so it's fairly bookkeepy, and it does not play particularly quickly. So lots of folks really don't care for it. I'm trying to figure out who the hell these guys are, if they're Austrians or what. I'm gonna take them as Prussians, and we'll figure it out when we set this thing up. Howard Chaykin did work on the early Marvel comic Star Wars stuff. I'm aware of some cool art that Howard Chaykin did. I did not not the cover for Patton's Third Army, which is an absolutely dreadful cover. 44 is, and you're gonna see a number of entries, including a couple quite high ones, from the Great Battles of the American Civil War system. Number 44 in this case is Wilson's Creek, about the Battle of Wilson's Creek, oddly enough. So that is one that I have, but I haven't played it and don't really have a feel for it at all. And in fact, the only one of the old SPI Great Battles of the American Civil War that I've even fooled with is Cedar Mountain. Number 42 is October War. I believe this is a Mark Herman design. And I might be wrong about that. I thought that was the case. Maybe not. But it's supposed to. I heard it was bad, and then I heard it was good. And more people now seem to think it was good. So I do have a copy. So at some point I can actually bust it out and give it a shot. It's the kind of game I'm reluctant to even give a chance to, because I'm not into Arab-Israeli wars. And if I start playing games about the Arab-Israeli wars, I am very likely to become interested in the Arab-Israeli wars. It is a topic I am currently safe from, and I would like to remain safe from it. There are some pretty interesting looking games on that topic that are either out or on their way. Joe Perez says Wilson's Creek was a component disaster. Every counter sheet was horribly miscut. I don't think mine is punched. I got it punched, and I don't think that mine is particularly bad. But that doesn't mean it's not misaligned either. Number 41 is World War II Pacific Theater of Operations, and this highlights a problem with Board Game Geek. This is on the list, even though it wasn't published by SPI. It was published by TSR, and I know it says SPI in the box. I've got it. It's not in this room, but I've got it. It is an interesting looking game. It and its companion game, which is higher on the list, somebody mentioned that it was SPI's answer to Third Reich, and I'll comment more about that when the European game comes up, because that's the one that originated with SPI in some capacity. Number 40 is BAOR, British Army of the Rhine. This is part of the Central Front series, and it is the lowest rated of the ones that SPI did, at least the ones that are in the top 50. This is a game that has an enduring following. I have South Africa as well. South Africa is supposed to be pretty bad, but I don't know. So I have at least one issue of S&T that's got a really, really atrociously misaligned counter sheet. Monmouth, I think, is the one that I have, and it's the last issue that SPI did. So let's see. We did number 40, British Army of the Rhine. Number 39 is Wacht am Rhein. Now, Wacht am Rhein is, again, it seems to be using a lot of the same. I've never handled a copy of Wacht am Rhein, so if I'm wrong about any of this, please say so. It seems to be a related system to Atlantic Wall, and I think it preceded it, but it's not the same system exactly. My understanding is that it had some issues. To what extent those issues were serious, I don't know, but issues are magnified by the size of the game in a lot of cases. So Mike Anthony says South Africa wasn't good as a game, but it was good as a study. That's the case with I don't know about what's going to show up on this list, but that's the case with a lot of SPI games, actually. I actually haven't taken a sip of scotch yet. What am I doing? Very good. Okay. So number 39 is Wacht am Rhein. Rather shockingly, I'm missing number 38. What was number 38? It's not on the list. It literally skips the list. That must be my mistake. Anyway, it's probably a gem. Sorry about that. Number 37 is Sicily Race for Messina. This is, I think, the highest rated of the Victory in the West. Smaller games. We'll see Operation Typhoon, which is, again, a related system. I think it's not technically part of the series, but it's a related system. Citadel of Blood's on this list, too. Number 36 is Panzer Army Africa. This is one that I think I've really never looked at this. It's not a game that I really see anybody playing or talking about anymore. Unlike a lot of the other games on this list, I see people talking about Sicily Race for Messina and Wacht am Rhein and the Central Front games. And even World War II Pacific Theater of Operations, although that's normally me talking about it when that happens. Roger Hemseth says that there's no more issues in Wacht am Rhein than in Last Blitzkrieg or Time for Trumpets. That I'm not disputing that. All games have their issues. So John Longshore is being a smart guy, as usual. Jeffrey Wesovich says that Panzer Army Africa at the time was great fun, and I don't doubt that. It was. I don't have a date on that, but it's. We had less to pick from at the time, not necessarily because less was being published, although that's true too, but because of the availability. Right, we didn't have the internet. You had to either get it from a brick and mortar store or buy it through the mail. And if you didn't know about a publisher, and a lot of almost everybody was smaller than SPI, then maybe you never saw games from GDW or People's War Games or whatever. Right, in the mid 70s, especially. Number 35 is Kharkov. I honestly don't know a lot about this game. I think it's a John Edward. I don't know. I didn't look it up. I don't want to say. I'm not sure who the designer was. I have seen it. I have not played it. And nor have I really talked to anybody about it. So, right. Now, some of these games I'll give you secondhand information because that's better than nothing. But I don't really know a lot about SPI's Kharkov. Next is To the Greenfield Beyond at number 34. This is about the Battle of the Marne. This is a game that people still talk about and still remember fondly. But it's a big World War I battle at what I take to be a grand tactical scale. It's a fairly interesting looking game. It's also pretty early, as I recall. I didn't look the date up onto the Greenfields Beyond. So I'm not sure if it's early or not, or if I'm thinking of one of the older SPI, very early World War I games. It's also, it was released in a box, so it's probably a later game, to be completely honest. Number 33 is Spies, which was later published by TSR in an, as far as I can tell, essentially identical edition. The counters were identical, the map was identical. Unlike a lot of the other SPI titles that they redid, they didn't redo the map. It was pretty much the SPI map, as I recall. So David Thompson, thanks for stopping by. It looks like Lanzerath Ridge from the Valiant Defense series is now shipping to backers. So Roger says that Kharkov was an evolution of of a game that will be appearing later on our list, Panzergruppe Guderian. And it was not as, it didn't make as big a splash. I mean, very few games made as big a splash as Panzergruppe Guderian, to be honest. That's like a top 10 most influential games of all time, I believe. And we will see it on this list. Number 32 is Fifth Corps. That is another game in the Victory in the West series. This is a little bit higher than previous ones. So those of you who, did I say Victory in the West? Central Front, the Central Front series, of which I think there were eventually 5 games, I think. But some of the later games in the series were published post SPI and don't match the graphics of the SPI versions of the game. There have been various attempts to either kind of clean that series up or flatly reimagine it, as in the case of the whatever that Dogs of War series is called, from Thin Red Line Games. It includes the game Dogs of War. And that seems to have made it a bit of a splash. Number 31 is Operation Typhoon. This is the genesis of the variable combat system of Victory in the West. Variable strength chits for the counters. It doesn't work quite the same way as it does in Victory in the West, I can tell you that. Operation Typhoon is one of maybe the only, I'll buy an awful lot if I get it for a great price. But it's one of the only things from SPI that's on my wish list that I don't have already. Alan Salazar, thanks for stopping by. Freddie the Great will make an appearance here shortly. Number 30 is Highway to the Right. This is a game that it was redone by Decision in an edition that new graphics and minor changes as far as I can tell. There were 2 editions, however, from SPI. There was a first edition with significant problems and a second edition that didn't exactly solve those problems. That is my understanding of Highway to the Right. Great box cover, but a game that I think probably earns its status just from the fact that it's one of the SPI soapbox monsters. And I'm sure people had fun with it back in the day, but I think it's probably not worth anybody's time to revisit at this point. Number 29 is a game that absolutely is worth revisiting at this point. And it's, I think, kind of a shocker that nobody's tried to redo it or even really try to design another game using the ideas from Russian Civil War, number 29. This is I don't have to look this up. This is a Jim Dunnigan design. It is an extraordinarily cleverly designed game. I think it's probably fair to say it has issues, but that perhaps result from less robust development than one might hope for. But nevertheless, Russian Civil War is a super interesting game. It's a game where you actually may have a reason to attack yourself. There's not a lot of games like that, and there's really no other game quite like this. It's another one of those games, kind of like Outreach, that SPI did, and nobody's really even tried. There's other games on the Russian Civil War, and some good ones, but this is a unique game mechanically. It is a multiplayer game, though, so it's hard to get to the table. It's something like... a lot of the Power Politics series were actually multiplayer games. It's something like a Console World Expo or a WBC. You should be able to get something like this to the table, and I think it's worth doing. Next is Leningrad. I don't know a lot about this either, except that it was popular enough or in demand enough that Decision redid it, and as far as I could tell, it's still in stock over at Decision. I don't know enough about it. No, I don't even really know. I mean, I know Leningrad's involved, but other than that, is it like, I think it's more of an operational level game rather than depicting the siege of Leningrad itself. That is a phenomenon we also see with Stalingrad games, relatively few of which actually cover the house-to-house fighting that occurred in the Stalingrad campaign. Many of them just cover, how many counters do we have after this? Oh, quite a bit of Russians. So we are going to have to sort the Russians. A lot of this Napoleon's 1813 campaign is Russian army here is huge. Mo says that Leningrad is a short, fast game, which is, very desirable for people who are in the market for that kind of thing. Where are we at? Russian Civil War, Leningrad. Number 27 is Winter War, which is another pretty small game. This is on the Winter War with Finland. It's a pretty well-regarded game. It's not necessarily, if you're like really into that topic, then you probably want the Finnish trilogy from some publisher who I don't recall. But you're also presumably willing to pay giant piles of money for that because it goes for an absolutely absurd amount of money. Winter War, on the other hand, I believe has been redone by decision, which is it's pretty well regarded. And actually, I'm not sure if it has been redone by decision or if it's about to be redone by decision. One of those two things. I'm not sure exactly when it came out. Mike Anthony mentions Finnish trilogy is Boku dollars, and yes, that's exactly right. Matt Davidson says that it also uses the Panzergruppe Guderian system. So again, Leningrad, pretty decent reputation on that. Might be worth your time if you're particularly interested in that Army Group North area, depending on exactly what it covers. Number 26 is Berlin 85. This is one that I had back in the day, and I never played it, but it's an interesting situation, and the scenarios are fantastic. I will highly encourage you to locate a copy of Berlin 85, which you should be able to score for $25 or less. It's almost worth $25 to read the scenarios. Those of you who have read the scenarios for Operation Werewolf know of that of which I speak. Now we are into the top 25, where I have actually done a little more research, so I have a little more information. Number 25 is Pea Ridge. Pea Ridge is obviously on the Battle of Pea Ridge. This is an interesting battle, sometimes, at least on the cover, called the Gettysburg of the West. That, may be fatuous bullshit, but it's an interesting situation, and it is, again, the great battles of the American Civil War system. The interesting thing, the thing that struck me about this is who the designer is. Eric Lee Smith designed this. Now, the original system dates from Terrible Swift Sword and the legendary late, great Richard Berg, whose name will be coming up a number of times in the immediate future here. Number 24 is Swords and Sorcery. Now, Swords and Sorcery is another one of these oddball science fiction or fantasy games that SPI did, and there's some interesting things. So Greg Kostikian design. Greg, if you're watching, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, because I'm going to do it again. It's an interesting design that tries somewhat to bridge the gap between a war game, at least a fantasy war game, and a tabletop role-playing game. I am not sure that it succeeded. This was the game I wanted as a kid back in the mid 80s and have still never scored a copy of. There are two different box covers, both of which are pretty good, but I think the red cover looks a little bit better if you ask me. There's also tons of puns and in-jokes and stuff like that in it. So for those who are of a mind to look for that kind of stuff, you may get a kick out of Swords and Sorcery. Number 23 is Battle for Stalingrad. This is a John Hill design. This was redone by Excalibur Games. I don't know what the differences are. I'm not 100% sure that I've handled an SPI edition of that game, but I have absolutely handled an Excalibur Games edition of that game. This is one of the few games that covers the city fighting rather than the area around Stalingrad, which, in some games called Stalingrad, covers the entire Eastern Front. It's like, why are we calling this Stalingrad again? Stalingrad's just kind of a thing in a corner of the map. It covers like the whole East Front. I don't understand. Mike Anthony says that the Excalibur edition was 100% straight reprint. It kind of looked like it, other than the updated graphics and counters and all that jazz. That was number 23. Number 22 is Cedar Mountain. Cedar Mountain is a 1981 release. This is an interesting battle, and it is a battle that has appeared again in the Great Battles of the American War system in the GMT game Twin Peaks, which covers Cedar Mountain and South Mountain. It's been a long time, thing I would like to do is to play both versions of Cedar Mountain and then do a compare and contrast of new GBACW to old GBACW. But the end of time is likely to occur before I actually get to that. So it's one of the things on the to-do list, and it is not at the top. So hopefully we'll get it done eventually. Number 21 is a Richard Berg design Desert Fox. Richard Berg was not necessarily known for it's ironic because was not necessarily known for his World War II games, but he also did Campaign for North Africa, which is possibly the most infamous World War II games. Half-Ass Gaming, first of all, welcome back to the stream. I feel like Compass Expo is a bit up in the air right now because of the house. If I'm gonna not go, this would be the year to not go. At the same time, I'd love to go. So we'll see what happens. It is possible. I mean, if I don't buy 13 games, I can make it a reasonably affordable trip. So it's not impossible that I will make it. But we'll see. It's also not impossible. It still seems a bit unlikely that I'll make it to Tempe next year, and I may talk about this later. There's a couple of things that I'd like to do that are higher on the priority list than going to Tempe next year. Let me put it that way. So after Desert Fox. Now, Desert Fox was redone. There were companion games that attached to it and an expansion that appeared in some magazine. And then the whole kit and caboodle was redone and somewhat revamped as Desert Fox Deluxe from Decision Games. That game of dreadful infamy that we all know that Stigler is a huge fan of. I have the boxed version, and it looks to me like there's a good game in there, but I can't really comment on the magazine version other than to mention that it was very well received when it came out. William Ayers points out that P Ridge has 30,000 combatants on both sides. Gettysburg has 175,000. I mean, yeah, it's not. I don't think they're trying to make the comparison that P Ridge is a battle of similar import to Gettysburg. I think that's really just kind of marketing speak. That maybe somebody in the period said who was at the battle, he got his leg shot off or something. I wouldn't take that too seriously. That's why I hedged on that a little bit. Vicksburg. So the another thing that is possible for me to do, it would be Winter Offensive in January. And that is an even less, potentially anyway, even less expensive trip. So we can, we'll talk about that when it gets closer. Roger Hemseth says that Stigler is 100% correct on Desert Fox Deluxe. And we all know what Stigler's opinion on Desert Fox Deluxe is. So number 20 is Voyage of the Bsm Pandora. Now, there were two of these, and I want to say John Butterfield was involved as the designer or co-designer of both of them. The other one was the wreck of the Bsm Pandora. Voyage of the Bsm Pandora came out later and is a prequel. These are supposed to be very good, actually. Both games appeared in Ares magazine, and they're supposed to be very good. And they're on my list of Ares magazines to get to. Winter Offensive could happen. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I don't want to count on anything, and I don't want to count on spending the money either, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff going on. Number 20, Voyage of the Bsm Pandora, designed by John Butterfield and Edward Woods, about whom I don't know anything else. And it did appear in Ares magazine. Number 19 is Ney versus Wellington. This showed up quite a bit higher on the list than I expected it to, actually. This uses the Wellington's victory system and may, in fact, address some of the issues that arose in the Wellington's victory system, or at least that people said arose in the Wellington's victory system, or because it's Quatre Bras, or those issues might be mitigated by the fact that it is a much smaller battle. I had Ney versus Wellington at one point. I gave it away. I wish I would have kept it, but maybe I will get Hux. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for coming by. He just recently got into wargaming through ASL Starter Kit #1 and found this channel. Thanks very much. I wanted to do more Starter Kit content at one point, but it never actually materialized, and other people have like filled in the gaps with ASL content. There was less of it when I was considering that, which has been several years at this point. So other than maybe new stuff coming out, I may or may not ever do any content on ASL Starter Kit, but it's awesome. ASL Starter Kit's great. Okay, number 19 was Knave versus Wellington. And that was actually a Joe Belkowski design. Joe Belkowski is not a name one traditionally associates with Napoleonic stuff. One normally puts Joe's name on things about the Civil War or about D-Day. But in this case, he did Knave versus Wellington on Quatre Bras. Number 18 is World War II European Theater of Operations. Now, this is a complicated history that you'll have a bit of a time digging out on Board Game Geek, because Board Game Geek has kind of bunged it up. So the original World War II European Theater of Operations was a 1973 release designed by Jim Dunnigan. Okay. Much later, when TSR had control of the SPI properties, they released a game called World War II European Theater of Operations, which is credited on board. I don't have a copy of it, so I can't look. Which is credited on Board Game Geek to Douglas Niles. Now, Doug Niles is a guy much, much more known for his contributions to D&D than for his contributions to wargaming. But then later, TSR published at the deluxe. I forget what exactly they called it, but there's like an expanded deluxe edition of World War II European Theater of Operations. And then they did the companion Pacific game, PTO. And those are definitely, because I have those are definitely Douglas Niles designs. Now, I can't speak to how close the Doug Niles TSR ETO lines up with the Jim Dunnigan original. But it can attest that Doug Niles, who was a serious war gamer and really wanted to design war games, and has done like a forward or a prologue or something to, I believe, to the Decision Games version, which we'll talk about in a second. I can attest that there's some fairly interesting ideas. I haven't tried to play it yet, but I got I think ETO is completely punched, and PTO I think is partially punched. And I don't punch and clip that on the show because they're the dreaded garbage TSR center nibs counters. There's some interesting looking mechanics in there, and I'd really kind of like to try it. I don't think it's going to like be the next, replace World in Flames as my go-to solution for strategic level World War II on the entire planet. But it does look like there's some interesting things in there, and I would like to give it a shot at some point. Okay. Number 17 is a J. Nelson design, and this is another one that you had to dig to get the exact chronology out of Board Game Geek. Because Abridged, the game that they released that's listed at number 17, is A Bridge Too Far. Now, this was a re-release of the earlier game called Arnhem, which had appeared in the Westwall Clod, and I believe J. Nelson was the designer the entire time. I don't know that, other than a new box, I don't know that it's any different. Jeff Beeler says that game leaves out the U.S. 401st Glider Regiment, shorting the U.S. 2 glider battalions. Well, that'd be unfortunate for the U.S. player, at least. I mean, it's originally a quad game, and we're going to get to the quads here. I think there's going to be, we'll talk about the quads a little more, because generally speaking, I think all or almost all the quads are worth at least a look, depending on your interest in those topics. If you're not interested in the modern stuff, then don't look at the modern battles quads. If you're not interested in Civil War, don't look at the blue and the gray quads. But they're all pretty light, very easy to digest games that play pretty quickly. And I think that at least some of those quads hold up very well. And one that's like not on the list here is Napoleon's Last Battles. And I think that's an artifact of the way that BGG does the ranking, right? That's like, that would be in my top 3, I think, from SPI would be Napoleon's Last Battles. I think it's a game that holds up splendidly today. And I see no reason why it wouldn't be on the list, unless, like I said, it's some kind of artifact of the way BGG runs the rankings or sorting, as the case may be. So that was A Bridge Too Far / Arnhem / part of the West Wall Quad. It's the only one of the West Wall Quad that shows up in the top 50. I can tell you that. Number 16, I'm a little surprised that this is as low as it is Brad Hessel's Cobra. This originally appeared in S&T, was published later by TSR. TSR's version added a whole nother map to do the beach landings as well. The Decision Games version, Decision has done 2 versions of it, one of which came out in S&T somewhere in the 200s, and then that version was tidied up a little bit, at least graphically, and was re-released in a boxed game, which is what I have. I do not have the original SPI magazine version. I had to think about that for a second, but I don't. I have the Decision Games reprint from a few years ago in the box. And that game looks pretty good. As somebody that's pretty heavily into D-Day stuff, that game looks pretty good. I think if anything, it might, if you play it from June 6th, it might suffer from the fact that the beach landings are an afterthought. Like the Killing Ground, it is about Cobra. So it's maybe not the most elegant landing system I've ever seen, but it's certainly far from the clumsiest. Press Dogs. Press Dogs is not on my list. I don't think Press Dogs is worth anybody's time at this point, to be completely honest. I mean, they are simple. I mean, it's not 4 games, but it's kind of one of the quad. It's a quad style package. I can see why people want to like it, but I don't think it's very good. And I have looked at those over the years. That was number 16, Cobra from Brad Hessel from 1977. Now, I, at least, I don't know if there's officially confusion in the community about this, but I have questions about the design provenance of our next entry, number 15, The Next War. Jim Dunnigan is listed as the designer. Mark Herman is listed as the developer. I don't know if that, strictly followed those traditional SPI lines or not. So, how much design influence did Mark Herman have is, I think, a great question that I, at this time, do not have an answer to. So we have half a counter sheet left on this. I have the board to this set up in the other room, so I actually want to play this, which certainly ain't happening this week. But it'd be nice if I got all the counters clipped, huh? And I'm trying to get it all in one counter tray, which I normally can do, but the counters are a little big, so they're eating a little extra space. Man, there's a lot of Russian leaders in this thing. Nels Lindquist says Next War is a study in time, of the period of 1980. I think it's 1980, something like that, the hypothetical Next War scenario. Now, Next War has never been redone. However, it has de facto been reimagined by the folks at Thin Red Line Games, whose 1985 series was inspired. I think if somebody wants to make the case that 1985 Under Iron Sky is just an update of the Next War, I think that's an oversimplification. But the inspiration there, I think, is pretty obvious for those who have looked at both games. I used to own the Next War in the soapbox, and in fact, I think it's a game that never came out in a flat. And I traded it for a copy of Empire of the Petal Throne years ago, and I can't say I got the worst end of the deal. But since then, in recent years, the Next War has kind of risen in people's esteem and attention, and that's why it shows up here at number 15, which is pretty high. Number 14 is another interesting sci-fi game, Star Trader. This also appeared in Ares magazine, and it's actually designed by Nick Karp, which I think I knew and had forgotten. I'm like, really? Nick Karp designed this? So yeah, apparently somebody sent me a copy of Star Trader, so thank you. And it is in my Universe RPG box because it is designed to link up with the Universe RPG, which is why I wanted it, actually, not so much to play it, although I think it does look kind of interesting. So Nick Karp is definitely best known for his seminal Vietnam design, Vietnam 1965 to 75 from Victory Games. Okay, number 14. Number 13 is another oddball, literally the most oddball of the bunch, in a lot of ways, game from SPI, and that's The Creature That Ate Sheboygan. This is a Greg Kostikian game. This is a total classic. This is another one where I think most people, including myself, are not 100% sure where the rights reside at this time. It is plausible that they reside with Hasbro, which would be pretty unfortunate because Hasbro's not going to do anything with The Creature That Ate Sheboygan. Now, there have been other more recent games that have done this kind of thing. Big Monster Smash stuff. King of Tokyo, for example, springs immediately to mind. And certainly King of Tokyo is much more up to date in terms of components and that kind of stuff. But for those looking for a kind of an old school wargaming approach to giant monster smash things, The Creature That Ate Sheboygan is kind of matchless in that category. Next is number 12. This is, in my opinion, way too high. Wellington's Victory is in at number 12. This is a design by Frank Davis. This was reprinted essentially verbatim by TSR, except they redesigned the maps. They didn't really redesign the counters. They technically redesigned the counters, but they basically look the same. They're just lamer. The maps are an absolute atrocity. They are some of the ugliest wargame maps that I have ever seen. They're definitely bottom 10 for ugliness of wargame maps. They're really very bad looking maps. Unfortunately, much of the rest of the bottom 10 ugly maps are much more recent than SPI or even TSR. I think, I have a hunch that Sheboygan was a dig at TSR, actually, because TSR is in this podunk Wisconsin town, and that's where Sheboygan is, and Sheboygan is just a funnier name. But yeah, total classic, totally worth playing. It really should get a new edition, but nobody's done that. Number 12, Wellington's Victory. Again, this was reprinted by TSR in a ghastly-looking edition, was later given a moderate to full redesign by our good friends at Decision Games, who, let's say that the Decision Games version is not well regarded. It's less well regarded than the TSR SPI version, which is in turn less well regarded than the SPI version. Now, I have the TSR version. It is not on this shelf anymore. I have the TSR version, and frankly, I don't need a different version of it. This is Waterloo, obviously. It's a big game. I want to say it's regimental scale. I want to say it's regimental scale, so it's not quite Labatt battalion scale, but it's a big game. I wouldn't mind playing it at some point, and I'd be happy to play the TSR version, even though it's super ugly. The SPI version, I've seen the SPI version, and it's pretty far from SPI's best looking stuff too. An interesting oddity, and this is an anecdote, and may or may not reflect the reality of the world as it is. It was only until like the last couple of years that I ever saw a copy of Wellington's Victory in the soapbox. I had seen it in the TSR version. I had seen it in the flat. I'm like, I've never seen this in a soapbox. I'd seen all the other ones, even the much rarer Topics in American History, or whatever that thing was called for classroom use. I'd seen that because it had come up at the Origins auction more than once. I'd seen all the other ones, but I had never seen Wellington's Victory in the soapbox. But I've seen it in pictures. So it every once in a while does come up on eBay. So I don't know if it was rarely produced in the box or what was going on. Trying to at least not get terribly behind on the chat. Number 11 is World War I. This is the quite early not that early, 1975 Jim Dunnigan design that's been redone by Decision a couple of times now, and was actually produced by SPI in at least 3 different editions. This is an enduring game. Decision has recently redone it again in a pretty nice addition. It's a very interesting game mechanically. It was really ahead of its time. I think it's still worth playing. If for no other reason, it doesn't take a million years to play. It plays relatively quickly as these kinds of games go. World War I is number 11. And number 10, we return to graphical aids here. Let's pull this up here. And pull this up here. Here we are. Number 10 is Napoleon at Waterloo. This was an introductory war game designed by Jim Dunnigan to introduce new people to war games, and it was, at least at one point, given away free by SPI as a starter little mini war game. Nowadays, and you can just go to the BGG page for this. Nowadays, you can find print and play versions online that are, fancy to whatever degree you would like to make it fancy. There are graphical things that I don't like about the original, but it remains a really good introductory game for a whole pile of reasons. One of which is it's a battle everybody knows about. Everybody knows about, at least, that Waterloo happened. Here's an opportunity to learn more about Waterloo without really much in the way of rules weight, right? And this is a picture of the rather ghastly decision boxed version. Game inside's fine, graphically it's fine, but the box is ugly. This is one of the later SPI editions. I believe this is a 1979 cover. It was also included in some kind of adventure pack that included like a sci-fi game, a fantasy game, and a historical game. Napoleon at Waterloo was the historical game. There was also an expansion released for it, which provided like advanced rules or something like that, which I kind of feel like that defeats the purpose of an introductory game. But hey, people want more, right? And it was very well received. And then this, as far as I could tell, is a later flat cover for Napoleon at Waterloo. Yes, believe it or not, this tiny game was released in a gigantic SPI flat. I've seen pictures of it. This was the cover at the time. It is a classic. It is a classic for a reason. The top 10 list is, which we're now getting into, by the way, because this is number 10, is interesting. There's some things that are in my top 10, like Outreach, that aren't in here. And there's a number of sci-fi titles that are maybe not ones I would have picked. Number 9 is Richard Berg's Conquistador. This is the probably much more widely available Avalon Hill version cover. I think it's a pretty good cover. This is a game about colonialism in the Age of Exploration, 1495 to 1600. Mechanically, it is a fairly interesting game. I did have it as a kid, which, at the time I did not look at it with a critical eye. I had a fondness for it, so I picked it up again in the last 2 or 3 years. And to be honest, I haven't really looked at it since then. At some point, I would like to revisit this game. I did buy it again after all. Doug mentions the Conquistador, and of course he's right. This is not a war game. This is an exploration and exploitation game. It is more similar to. It kind of occupies a middle ground between a war game and something like Source of the Nile, in that sense. And then this is the original cover of Conquistador as it appeared in S&T magazine. The reason I wanted the Avalon Hill version is that there are some optional rules. I'm not sure where those appeared. There's some optional rules for things like German explorers and the Dutch bankers and stuff like that. And you get the counters for that in the Avalon Hill version. You didn't in the original magazine version. So Brian Gesh asks, how would the SPI Waterloo compare to Mark Herman's? Let me pull the comment up here. How would SPI Waterloo compare to Mark Herman's introductory Waterloo just released? So I'm gonna cheat on this and say I think that it's easier for me. It would be easier to learn the Napoleon at Waterloo. But that's not to say that Mark Herman's Waterloo is hard to learn. But more importantly, the two games are at quite different scales. Napoleon at Waterloo is a game about the battle. Mark Herman's Waterloo is a game about the campaign. It is really an operational game, and therefore I don't think it's right to directly compare them. Waterloo was based on the Gettysburg system that had appeared in the previous issue of C3I, and I think I've said this before. I did not care for Gettysburg. I felt like it was chess-like in a way. I don't like chess. I know Mark's a big chess player, and that really shows in that design. But I really felt the lack of tools as a player of that game, and it just was. It did not hold my interest as an introductory war game. I think it's a very good game. But on the other hand, the same system then goes to Waterloo, but he changes the scale and he turns it into much more of an operational game, and I think it works really well. But again, the recent C3I Waterloo is an operational game, really, and the Napoleon at Waterloo and all the other Waterloo games we've talked about here are tactical games about the battle, so I don't think they're directly comparable. It depends on what you're interested in. Okay, so original Conquistador, number 7, I believe. This is the Ardennes Squad. This is number 8, actually, is the Ardennes Squad. This is Danny Parker design. I don't know if he was involved in the Decision Games thing. It's another example of so it's my understanding that the Decision Games edition of this is basically just the old Ardennes Squad with updated graphics, which is fine, right? They generally do a good job at that level of revision, okay? It really shows that that SPI. I'm gonna show you this box, and then I'm gonna show you this box. This is the TSR box, by the way, which actually I think is a pretty good box. And this is the SPI box. Okay, I think it's real obvious here which box designer has a background in graphic design, and it's not this person. Okay, and that shows throughout a lot of Decisions history. To be completely honest, not to say that it's generally problematic in terms of the actual play components, but you can really tell on the box covers. A lot of their box covers are absolutely ghastly. And I think this is just ugly. I think that the Napoleon at Waterloo box is ugly too. And war game boxes are easy. You put a picture of Napoleon on the cover, you say Napoleon wherever, and off you go. But there is in fact more to it than that. So not a fan of the box cover. This TSR cover again. TSR, at some point, I will actually do a show about TSR as a war game publisher. That's not tonight. They had some really They did release a couple of good games. They had some really significant idiosyncrasies as a war game publisher. And this is kind of one of them. But I think this is probably, of all the box covers that they did, I think this is one of the best ones. Okay, so after Ardennes Squad is number 7, Frederick the Great. This was, did I not get the, nope. We did not get an Avalon Hill version of the cover here. So this is the original SPI version. This appeared in S&T number, I can't read the issue number. I think it's number 19 or something like that. So it's pretty early. This is about Frederick the Great. Very influential game. Holds up, I think, really well. I do think you probably, if you're going to try and fish this up, I think you probably, and it runs for $50 or $60, which I think is kind of high. I kind of feel like you want the Avalon Hill version for the better component quality. And I say that as somebody who has not maybe as much faith as you'd hope in Avalon Hill's component quality. But I think in this particular case, I'd rather have the Avalon Hill version. So that's the one that I'm in the market for, but I do have an SPI version in the flat, which you may have seen in one of the videos. All right, so I did get it. How did I skip it? So this is I assume this is a Roger McGowan cover, and I think this is a good cover. I think it's a very good cover. It's got that kind of classic picture of Frederick the Great on it, and it is an operational game. Number 6 is Empires of the Middle Ages. This is the one I have, which is the much later Decision Games redo, which is not a straight reprint. It adds some kind of a lot of new cards that are like included as optional cards. and it moves the map from a point-to-point map to an area map. And I haven't actually studied the differences between the two to understand whether that changes the topology of the map or not. It doesn't have to, and maybe it doesn't in this case, but it could, because it's a different kind of map. And I think the shift to the areas probably is helpful, but I also think it'd be super helpful to blow the map up by about 50%. I think the Decision Games version, I believe, is a 2-map game. I haven't cracked it in 2 years. But this is a classic multiplayer game. It's not really a war game. It's a game that's really well regarded and which I think holds up really well. And maybe that's less visible to people because it's a multiplayer game, so it's harder to get people going on. Doug mentions that The Sword in the Stars is basically a slightly stripped down and science fictionized version of Empires of the Middle Ages, which is correct. I actually had The Sword in the Stars at one point and don't have it anymore. Probably shouldn't have gotten rid of it, but it's not really on my wish list. I do, however, have Empires of the Middle Ages and would love to play it someday with a full table. Hooks asks, is there a stigma held against enthusiasts of war games? If you tell someone who isn't familiar with the hobby that you're into wargaming and get a negative response due to the theme history of war, I think that does happen. I don't think it really necessarily happens all that often, to be honest, unless you're a dick. And in that case, they're not reacting to the details of your hobby. They're reacting to the fact that you're a dick. So I am not particularly ashamed of the fact that I do historical simulations, and the folks at work, I mean, I don't blah, 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 blah at work constantly at people, because then it becomes an annoyance. But that's independent of the hobby, right? You're just annoying them with something different. So, maybe don't overdo it, but I think it's perfectly fine to tell people that you're into war games. But then again, I'll mention this too. Many people, particularly in certain parts of the world, will assume from that statement that you are in fact talking about miniatures games, and you might not be. So bear that in mind, and be prepared to explain that away if you're stuck in that particular situation. So yeah, this is pretty much what I said. This is a good point. It does start with the Charlemagne solo scenario. I don't know that that's true of the Decision Games version or not. I mean, we've all probably heard this as well. It'd be a worthwhile extra a show topic for a future show to talk about, kind of like the public face of wargaming. There's an interview with me and some other people whose names you will recognize coming up that I will point you all to when it appears on the internet. That does touch on this subject to some degree. Okay, so number 6 was Empires of the Middle Ages. Now, 2 of the top 5 are science fiction or fantasy games. There's one science fiction and one fantasy game. And I felt like that was another interesting artifact of the way BGG rates games and the audience that it uses to that contributes to its rating system. This looks super interesting, actually, from VUCA, the Great Crisis of Frederick II. That does look pretty interesting, I must admit. So number 5 is Freedom in the Galaxy. I gotta admit, I am a big fan of Freedom in the Galaxy. Actually, I actively like Freedom in the Galaxy. I played it. It was one of my main things that I wanted to run down from this era. I like Freedom in the Galaxy a lot. I think it's a very good game. I think it's unquestionable that were somebody designing this kind of game now, it would look a lot more like Star Wars Rebellion and a lot less like Freedom in the Galaxy, because it's pretty war gamey. I mean, you could probably have an argument about whether it's a war game or not, although I'm not going to. But it's pretty war gamey regardless. So I think it's a very good game. I'm not sure it's quite as good as number 5, even considering the context of what the next couple are. This was reprinted by Avalon Hill. The cover is basically the same. Component quality is different. The Avalon Hill version had a mounted map, but it's one of those shitty mounted maps. It's not a good mounted map like Avalon Hill sometimes did. It's one of those kind of mounted maps that warp very easily. The SPI version had an unmounted map in which you just put it under plexi and off you go. And I saw some people playing the SPI version at Origins a couple years ago. Again, I think this is it's a dated game, but I think it's still a good game, and I think it's interesting and still holds up pretty well. And number 4 is Terrible Swift Sword. So there have been 3 different versions of the Battle of Gettysburg in the Great Battles of the American Civil War system, just by GMT. Okay, this is the first. I didn't get pictures of all of them. This is the first one of 3 Days of Gettysburg, which is the reimagined, pretty different system version of the Battle of Gettysburg in the Great Battles of the American Civil War system. This is the game that kicked off the current incarnation of that series with GMT. It is now, and has been since this box, a chip pull system, which I think works very well. I'm very happy with the way the chip pull works in GBACW. But this is the very TSR looking cover of their version of Terrible Swift Sword, and like TSR's version of Wellington's Victory, the map art is really very bad. I don't have any water down here. All I have is scotch. Jeff Anderson asks, can the Rebellion win for Freedom of the Galaxy? Yeah, they can, but I mean, the Empire has the deck stacked in their favor. That's kind of how the game's designed. I don't have a count, but a lot of these did end up at Avalon Hill at some point. I can tell you that. And those that didn't, in many cases, if they were popular, ended up getting redone by TSR. So Terrible Swift Sword, I think this is not a bad cover, but man, it's this cover just screams TSR, doesn't it? Larry Elmore did this cover art, right? I'm sure there's a dragon hidden in somebody's pants in this particular picture. And Larry's a great artist, but this was way outside his wheelhouse. And not that this is bad art, it's not. It's just the cover screams TSR because it's literally got TSR, one of their signature artists, to do the cover. Put that there. Let's put these here. I think we're not going to get the rest of the Russians clipped tonight here, since we're 70 minutes in. Stay tuned. Number 3 is, Terrible Swift Sword. This is the soapbox version from SPI. There was a flat version as well, which is probably more common. Number 3 is War of the Ring. Now, not the Games of Middle-earth. I don't think that Sauron and Gondor are all that worthwhile. Gondor is kind of neat. It's the Siege of Minas Tirith. That's kind of cool. But really, the War of the Ring is the centerpiece of the Games of Middle-earth. I mean, it's by far the largest of the 3, right? This is a Howard Barish and Richard Berg design. And I think, once again, it is not a particularly well-balanced game. And maybe that's intentional. Plot to Assassinate Hitler is not on this list. That's another game that I think is a very interesting game that maybe deserves a look nowadays, even if you end up saying, I don't think this quite works as a game, which I think would be fair. But the Plot to Assassinate Hitler is another interesting one. And we'll talk in a minute about which ones didn't make this list. So this is the, I think, second version of the cover based on the animated Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings movie, in which Aragorn was voiced by John Hurt, by the way, and Legolas by Anthony Daniels, which is pretty fantastic, I think we'll all agree. This is the other one. This is the one I have. I think this is a pretty interesting game, actually. It's very much a wargamer's approach to the War of the Ring, where we're going to try and do this game as a simulation for whatever fantasy value of simulation we we want to have, right? I think it's a pretty interesting game. One of the more interesting aspects of it is there are three sides. There's the Free Peoples, there's Sauron, and there's Saruman. And Saruman is at a massive disadvantage. And he really absolutely has to play the other two players off against one another to win. But at the same time, if you could pull off a win as Saruman in this thing, I mean, that's going to be enormously satisfying. I don't know if I'd put this at the third best SPI game ever, to be fair. I think there are others that are maybe more deserving. I mean, I think Terrible Swift Sword is probably more deserving of this high place than War of the Ring. But nevertheless, I do think this is a worthwhile item. Obviously, we know why we didn't see this get reprinted. I'm kind of shocked that they meant, well, I was going to say I'm kind of shocked that they got the license in the first place. But remember that for several more years, the Tolkien Enterprises people didn't really know what they were doing with the license. They really didn't realize the value of it. They licensed it to Iron Crown, and then they had to take it away from them at a later time. Number 2 is Battle for Germany. This is another classic Jim Dunnigan design. Very clever, but very simple core idea. Each player, it's a 2-player game. Each player is playing both sides. It's very interesting. One player plays the Western Allies, and then the Germans that are opposing the Soviets, and the other player plays the Soviets and the Germans that are opposing the Western Allies. It's extremely clever. Decision Games has done it at least 2 editions of it. I think there might even be 3. This is a picture of the most recent deluxe edition, which I do have an unboxing of, so check that out. It is very nice, to be fair. And it is basically just the old game. Their version of Battle for Germany is pretty much the old Battle for Germany with really nice components, mounted map, thick counters, all that jazz. So Jim Dunnigan, genius. What can I say? This is an earlier and somewhat... Which box is uglier, folks? I'm not sure. They're both fairly ugly. I'm going to say this one's graphic design wise, I think this is a little bit better, but I think this cover, I think the images actually maybe work a little bit better. This color scheme, I think, works a little better. This color scheme is like, let's make every box tan. Because there's nothing, every wargamer says, this game would be much better if the box were more beige. I'm not sure, what the thinking was there. But this is the original magazine version, SAT number 50 of Battle for Germany. It is end of 1944 to the end of the war. The top 2 are, in fact, SAT games. Panzergruppe Guderian is number 1. I think this is one of the... I think every wargamer who really is interested in the history of commercial wargaming and hobby wargaming and SPI and Avalon Hill and stuff like that should probably have a copy of this and should give it a whirl at some point. I don't know that you'll need to play it again, but this game is enormously influential. A lot of the other games on this list wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Panzergruppe Guderian. This is the Avalon Hill edition. I think it is. If Roger McGowan's name wasn't on here, we would all know that Roger did this cover. This is the original, presumably Redmond Simonson cover of Panzergruppe Guderian from S&T number 57. Which is also, I think, a pretty good cover. And the boxed version of this, and there was an SPI boxed version, looks basically exactly like this. So other than not saying strategy and tactics at the top, it's a very similar graphic design. I would have this at number 1 as well for its influence, not necessarily for it holding up extraordinarily well today, but I think it is still worth playing. So things that didn't make the list. William Boardman mentions A Mighty Fortress. I think the consensus is that Mighty Fortress pretty much just didn't work. So neat idea. I think we all can agree that it was a neat idea. But I think it didn't work. Ian Borchardt, first of all, welcome to the stream. Thanks for coming by. S&T the magazine was for experimentation, but then you had experimentation combined with, in a lot of cases, fairly dodgy playtesting and development to meet a magazine publishing schedule. And I think maybe that ended up not working. Now, I wouldn't have included this game as eligible for the list because it was published by TSR and not SPI. I don't care if it says SPI on the box. Gleam of Bayonets looks interesting, actually. It's kind of an intermediate game between the SPI era of GBACW and the GMT era of GBACW. There's a couple games that occupy that kind of middle ground. I do have a Gleam of Bayonets, actually. Don't know where it is because I don't have the box. I have it's in a white mailer box, and I don't know which white mailer box it is or where those boxes are. Battle Over Britain is another one published by TSR. It's on BGG's list, but I wouldn't have considered it eligible for this list. Now, Battle Over Britain is a John Butterfield game on the Battle of Britain. It looks pretty good. I got to tell you, I have the Spitzer version of this, and it looks pretty good. So that's a classic picture of Guderian, I gotta say. Stigler says it's exhausting and it's ugly. I mean, it's a TSR era map. In this case, they didn't even have the excuse of not choosing to use the more attractive SPI map. They just designed their own ugly map. I still think the battle is very interesting, and I would love to play GBACW Antietam. Let me put it that way. Sniper, Doug Sunseth mentions Sniper. This is a very interesting game. I've never really explored it, but it is a very interesting game and is another one of those games that I think was ahead of its time. John Longshore mentions Drive on Stalingrad. That's certainly a thing that somebody said. I'm kidding with John in this case. I don't know the Drive on Stalingrad is particularly bad. There's the SPI Barbarossa too, which TSR thought highly enough to reprint. I didn't think it was worthwhile to do that, but it was a thing that they did. Looking back and seeing, let's see. I got sidetracked a little bit, but hey, I came into this show with an outline tonight. So, and our numbers are looking great. So, maybe that we stuck to the topic is good. So now what I want to know is, what did we leave, between the things I stuck in the list and the things VG stuck in the list, what did we leave off? Battlefleet Mars is one of the sci-fi ones that I didn't really ever investigate. I was mildly curious, and it just never showed up on my list of things to look at. Hux asked, what SPI game do we like the most for solitaire play? I say any of the Victory in the West games, or for that matter, to a somewhat lesser extent, Operation Typhoon. Because you are all the unit, well, not all the units, but a lot of the units have a variable strength where you don't determine the unit strength until the unit fights, and then you draw a chit from a cup depending on what the general proficiency factor of the unit is, and only then do you know what the strength is. And the strengths are all hidden from your opponent too. So if you don't remember that unit had 3 strength left, well, it might not, maybe it doesn't. So for that reason, those games play, I think, pretty well solitaire. Those 3 games in the series are Patton's Third Army, Sicily Race to Messina, and Operation Grenade. And I think the one that holds up the best, I think, is Sicily Race to Messina, but it's also a significant step up in complexity from the previous games in the series too. So bear that in mind. If you're going to start playing those games, none of them are horrendously expensive. You can get magazine versions of all of these punched for $20, maybe less. So totally worth your time. So I don't have Typhoon. Okay. My understanding of Typhoon is that there are hidden strengths, but they're not variable. And if that's the case, then I think that's significantly different from Victory in the West implementation of a very similar idea. Somebody mentioned, we got tons and tons of David Harrison. We did get to Cobra. That was on the list. Hetzer, which is, I'm a little unclear as to whether that was an expansion or a standalone, to be honest about it. A lot of people had fun with Wolfpack. I'm not sure how well that holds up today, but a lot of people had fun with Wolfpack. John Carter. This is a Mark Herman design. I had the game back in the day and was really kind of looking for the John Carter role-playing game, which didn't come out until many years later from Modiphius, which is a nice product, beautifully produced books. And that's not what I got in the SPI John Carter. I got rid of it. I probably shouldn't have. I'd very much like to take a look at that again today. It has a fabulous Don Mates cover. That is a fabulous game. Fast Carriers is a game that I think does get mentioned nowadays. I don't really see folks playing it anymore. The big one for me is, I didn't see Jeff say this, but I obviously just missed it. The big omission in that BGG Top 50 is Napoleon's Last Battles. Why that's missing is absolutely baffling to me. La Grande Armée is a quite early, I think 72 or 73 SPI release. And there is a later version from Spitzer that was released by TSR, which is, from what I can tell, based on some similar ideas, but it is a massive operational expansion to include much of the Napoleonic period using a fairly similar system to the SPI La Grande Armée. My understanding, I do have it. It is my goal to get it played at some point, at least to maybe to fiddle with it. It looks fairly interesting. Like I said, I believe it to have some problems, and I find those reports credible. Matt Davidson mentions City Fight, which is another interesting game that kind of, it's another game that's, even to this day, we really haven't seen a lot of games like that. Let me put it that way. Nels Lindquist, Year of the Rat. This is a fascinating game, actually. How well it plays, I haven't the vaguest idea. But it's a game about the Vietnam War, released when the Vietnam War was still going on. I would be very curious just to look at that and read the magazine that it came out in. Brian Jarvis mentions Plot to Assassinate Hitler. Again, I think you're going to end up with if you get a copy of the Plot to Assassinate Hitler, and it was released in a box, it was released in the magazine. It's not expensive. You can go run a copy down for $20-25. I think you play it and you end up maybe thinking this doesn't work. But it's a very interesting game conceptually. Again, I think it's many years ahead of its time. It's another Jim Dunnigan design. It's a really interesting design that I think if they had put another 6 months of development into it, it could have been a complete masterpiece. Doug mentions Albion Land of Fairy. This was released by Ares in the Ares magazine. Several of the Ares magazines look pretty good, and the Albion map looks pretty cool. I mean, you could run a D&D campaign in that thing. That'd be actually pretty cool. E4 Airmen, because somebody had to mention Scrimmage. Nobody's mentioned Campaign for North Africa except me, by the way. That game has, a somewhat exaggeratedly bad reputation. I think nowadays you got laptops and Excel, and I think that completely changes the dynamic for a game like Campaign for North Africa, which would have been a big pain in the ass to play back in 1980. But nowadays you play it online. I got 3 monitors. I got Excel over here. I got Vassal over here. That sounds pretty playable to me. Thank Pete 41. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Nobody mentioned War in Europe until just now, unless I missed it, which is, again, very plausible. I have War in Europe. I've played War in Europe. I think War in Europe's got a lot of problems. Nevertheless, I'm enormously fond of it. I think there's a really good basic engine in there. I think it just needed more work. It was based on, the earlier release of War in the East and War in the West, and then you put the two together and you get War in Europe. I think I am more intrigued by War in the Pacific than I am by War in Europe, because I played War in Europe, and I feel like even though it's been 20 years, I feel like I have a sense even now of what War in Europe is and how it plays, and it's a pretty good game. It is going to kind of go off the historical rails pretty easily. War in the Pacific, on the other hand, has some really interesting ideas and mechanics in it that I'd really like to kind of try. Jeff Feeler mentions Firefight. This is one of these games. This is a man-to-man game, if I'm not mistaken. So Yeah, I think they did do it on commission from the Army, and then this was the publishable version. It's a man-to-man game, I believe, and if that's the case, then if nothing else, there's very little in that space other than that. Commando was the forgotten SPI role-playing game. Actually, it's another one of these games that kind of straddles the border between RPGs and tabletop war games. It's pretty interesting in that respect. Time Tripper, as we've all heard Dan say, he paid $1 million for his copy of Time Tripper. Time Tripper, I think, is a Jim Dunnigan design too, and it is, I think it's kind of a novelty item, to be completely honest. I mean, you can have fun with it, don't get me wrong, and certainly you probably could solitaire. So for those interested in Dallas, the television role-playing game, please check out the unboxing video that I did on that game a few months ago. I got a copy of it for like $25 in the shrink wrap. It was absolutely pristine, off of eBay, no less. It is a more interesting game than I think it gets credit for. But of course, I kind of chuckled at it a couple times in the video. And the one person who's a big fan of the Dallas, the television role-playing game, came out of the comments. And I'm like, seriously, bro? You're really going to fight me on this? Seriously? The East is Red. Great title, if nothing else. Sino-Soviet conflict in the 1970s. That by itself makes it interesting. It's a game we didn't see very much on those topics. Another thing that we didn't see very much of, I'm going to have to skip ahead to John Friesen now, aren't I? Was the topic of Objective Moscow, which is another big box game. John Friesen, thanks so much. It is much appreciated. The Scotch Fund has run dry. Not that I'm out of scotch. I'm not out of scotch, but things have been tight lately. Let me put it that way. So basically my entire next paycheck is going to the first house payment. So there will be no new scotch in here anytime soon. And I'll have to live on my bottle of Lefroy quarter cask until such time as that materializes. But thank you so much. It is much appreciated. I wasn't going to include Dragon Quest because it's a straight RPG. It's not confused about what it is. It is a straight it's a wargaming RPG. But a lot of the games from that period of 79, 80, 81, 82 are, in fact, fairly wargamey. So I think that it wasn't going to be on my list of things to do or things. I didn't consider it as eligible for this list. Let me put it this way. The exact title. I could have sworn this was post SPI, but I could be wrong about that. I'd be happy to be wrong about that. Foxbat and Phantom, yeah, modern air war. Wasn't interested in that at all. Nor air war, but the people who were into air war were super into air war, right? So that's absolutely true. So back. Let me mention. Well, let's get to this first. Stigler apparently has a low opinion of Bloody April, and my opinion of it's not that low, but I will happily admit that Into the Woods, despite the title maybe not being great, is an improvement on Bloody April in absolutely every way. Absolutely every way. So if you're interested in a game on Shiloh, go check out Into the Woods, a detailed game on Shiloh, to be fair. Jeff Beeler mentions Great War in the East Quad. So it's worth taking a few minutes to talk about the quads, because even though I'm not convinced personally that absolutely every one of those games is particularly worthwhile nowadays, let me get this off of here. All the quads are at least worth a look, right? Again, assuming you're interested in the topic. Great War in the East is one. Operational World War I battles. They chose the battles so that they are, in fact, interesting battles. So that's good. I believe Tannenberg is like the 5th game in the quad that wasn't in the box. I think that's the case. The Army Group South quad has some interesting things. Now, there is let me mention this with caveats. There is a new Army Group South system coming out from Decision Games, okay? It is an adaptation of many of the ideas from SPI's Army Group South Quad. And I think it's not going to be a quad. I think it's going to be a dual pack. I think there's going to be 2 battles per game, and they project it to be a series. Tony Burkett is the designer. He designed the Third Winter. Tony's a friend of mine. I think Tony is a very good designer and has very good instincts. We played it in the play test, and I think we were the very first people to get our hands on it. And it was pretty rough at the time, but that was like 2 or 3 years ago. So it is very plausible that it is in good shape now. And I understand that it is somewhere near the release pipeline at this time. We've already mentioned Russian Civil War, very much worthwhile. Stonewall did not make the list. So Stonewall is at least sort of, I think, a Great Battles of the American Civil War system. This is Battle of Kernstown. My understanding, do I have a copy of Stonewall? I don't think I do. I had one at one point. It's a very small game. There's like 30, 40 counters in the whole thing. My understanding is it's got some significant differences from the other GBACW games that SPI did. And if that's the case, then I'm not sure what I can reliably say about it. Grunt, geez. NATO Division Commander. Doug says one of the few LAN games that really tried for the double blind experience. I don't know anything about NATO Division Commander, but I can tell you that GDW did a whole series of double blind games with 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the series that I think were not hugely successful, but some of those are fairly well regarded nowadays. And the double blind aspect is a gimmick to some extent when we're talking about tabletop war games, right? It's generally considered by designers to be more trouble than it's worth, it seems to me. Arena of Death was in Ares magazine, that's true, and it was released on its own as well, and it's basically Dragon Quest combat on a hex grid. The Alamo, I'm not sure how good a game this was, to be honest, but I do know that a lot of people played it back in the day. That's for sure. I don't know if this is true or not, but it does kind of feel like that, I have to admit. Fold a Gap. Yep. Another one of these Central Front series games, which you could, in principle anyway, you could put all that together. This is Kirk Sorensen. Thank you for stopping by. I'm chuckling over your comment. Air War was described by one reviewer, might have been Richard Berg, as much like a battle of extremely ponderous peasants armed with pikes in a swamp. Fantastic. Bloody April, the air game, is not the same thing as Bloody April, the Shiloh game from SPI. I'm not a huge fan of reusing titles, and this particular situation, which has confused lots of people, is in fact the reason why. Well, okay, so let me address this, because GDW invented the monster game with Dragnok Austin and La Bataille de la Moskva. So GDW here is the influencer. Usually that's the other way around. Usually it's SPI influencing somebody else. In this case, it's GDW influencing SPI, in my opinion. War in the East didn't come out for a year or a year and a half or something like that after Dragnok Austin had already come out. And the scales are pretty similar. Strategy Talk does have some Dunnigan interviews. Yes, those are worth your time. Yeah, okay, I was right. Tannenberg is the fifth wheel in the World War I quad, in Great War in the East quad. I'll tell you what, that was a good magazine. I miss having a magazine like that. The closest thing we have to that nowadays is War Diary. And unfortunately, back in the day, you get away with covering 3 or 4 publishers, and now you can't. So we feel the lack of like a general magazine more acutely. But on the other hand, we have other outlets for information, right? We have other places to get news. We have other places to see commentary. We have other places to have discussions other than a magazine's letter column, right? All of the, I believe Into the Woods is very reasonably priced. Let me put it that way. Doug says the only game he can think of with a worse game time to simulated time ratio than Air War Starfleet Battle. So I've never played Air War, but I've played a fair amount of Starfleet battles. And this is an accurate statement, but if you think about it, this is true of almost any tactical game, as I had to tell Dan not too long ago. So Fall of Rome did not make the list. I've heard mixed things about Fall of Rome. I heard people say it's complete garbage, and I've heard other people say that they kind of liked it. It was redone by decision, which I have every reason to believe that was badly bungled. To the green fields beyond, we did put this in the list. Welcome back, sagacious hamster. Chuck Turner still has SPI's War of the Ring. Chuck, we should play it at some point. I have it too. Kernstown in Death Valley is way better than Stonewall. Totally prepared to believe that too. That's another one of those. I mean, the system upgrade there is really significant, and I strongly prefer. As much as I would like to play Cedar Mountain to like have video material to do a cool video on, I have complete confidence that the modern system is superior in most to all respects to the old GBA CW system as it appeared under SPI's dominance. I mean, the problems with Terrible Swift Sword alone were pretty well documented. John Madison played Normandy Campaign. This is one of the GDW double-blind systems. There was a Market Garden one as well. That's kind of the one I'm most interested in, but on the other hand, I got kind of a million Market Garden games. So big thanks to Brian Gash. Thank you so much. Wow. Much appreciated, to say the least. Very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much for that support. It was even in a different color than all the other contributions. So thank you so much. Mech War 2 had its fans. I mean, I'm not that big of a modern conflict in the 80s guy. So I'm not the guy to ask that question of. I am badly overexposed on that topic. But it did have its fans, and I know the box itself goes for decent change. Joe Press Folded Gap was a one-off, not part of Central Front. I'm thinking of something different then. Probably one of the million other Folded Gap games. Berlin 85. We did mention Berlin 85. Red Star, White Star. Yeah, didn't think of this at all. So this is the West Wall Quad. So there was a game called War in the West, and then there's the West Wall Quad or West Wall Battles or something like that. And that is where the Arnhem game originally appeared. And that's exactly what you think it is. It's 5th British Airborne at Arnhem Bridge. Matt Davidson, I haven't seen a mention of Art of Siege. Art of Siege is another quad. I think it's another quad that a bonus game appeared at some point. This is another one that I think is worth an investigative look. Not necessarily because the games hold up better than, say, Prestogs, but frankly, there's a lot fewer games on siege warfare than there are about random Romans against random Vikings against King Arthur. So that was in Great Medieval Battles, not Prestogs. But you know what I'm saying. Art of Siege is interesting. I, again, don't know. I've never owned it. I've never seriously considered buying it. It goes for nice money. But I think it is worthwhile. Descent on Crete. I think that is considered a near monster, maybe a monster. I don't know if was considered a classic at the time, but it's a big, beefy game. And therefore it is actually of interest to me, except that I already have 2 or 3 games on the invasion of Crete. And I don't know until I play at least one of them how interested I am in the invasion of Crete. So I'm not sure what game this appeared in. So there was an SPI. This is kind of legendary. One of the SPI games, the rules for nukes said to douse the map in lighter fluid and light a match to it. Could have been Red Star, White Star. I don't remember because I looked at that in somebody else's game. I never owned whatever game that was. Ed Holtzman says that YA will occasionally cover publishers beside Flying Pig, but YA has a game in every issue, so the issues are $40 or $50 a piece, right? And that's the thing that we're missing is sort of the commentary magazine. We got good magazines, and I've actually never opened a copy of a YA magazine. It might be great for all I know. It certainly has a distinctive visual style that I think is in a good way. It jumps out at you off the newsstand. Not that I've ever seen it on a newsstand, but I have seen it on a rack at Origins, and it looks pretty good there. Stigler, who is my go-to person for Central Front, is North German Plain, BAOR, 5th Corps, Hofgap, and Donau Front. Hofgap is probably the game I'm thinking of rather than Fulda Gap. This is probably true. The turns in Outreach are essentially generational. It's another, and we've hit in this discussion kind of a lot of games that SPI did that nobody really has ever really tried to do, right? Nobody, nobody's tried to do another game with the scope of Outreach or the bizarre interplayer system of Russian Civil War. Michael Sundborg, thank you so much. Much appreciated. We got it. We're still working on the game room. Progress has not been what I wanted it to be. So, but progress is being made. I got some of the workshop stuff done. We just got to get stuff put away at this point. It's not games, just that's basically done other than the shelves. But we have been pretty much on topic tonight, by the way. So there's that. And I've been so invested in this topic that I've almost not remembered to drink scotch. That's pretty unusual. Alan Salazar, too. Thank you so much once again. The support is greatly appreciated. Oh, geez. Carl Creator from the Wargame Boot Camp. Oh, boy. Oh, thank you so much. That's much appreciated. It is going to help a great deal. I really do appreciate the support. Thank you so much, all of you who have contributed. So it could have been in NATO. I believe this has become something of a legend, and almost any game that might have involved nuclear war, we sometimes see that this statement is attributed to that game. And Jeff Beeler, Flight of the Goban. That's a very interesting looking game, actually. I've thought about picking a copy of Flight of the Goban up. It's an interesting topic. There's very little on that in the wargaming space. And it's a game that you can, again, I think pick up pretty inexpensively. So, and thank you once again. This is maybe we are. I feel like Jerry Lewis at this point. So I think Brian is joking when he says this, but the idea of doing like a little mini con actually has occurred to me, and it's possible to do it in a way that's sensible and only needs to draw 15 people to make sense. So the idea of having an Ardwulf con is not necessary, although I have no concrete plans, I hasten to add. But nevertheless, that is not impossible that will occur. And of course, what we'd probably do is say, hey, there can be side games too, but they're going to be like a marquee game, and we'll set up a couple copies of that. That is my thought. That is kind of the OCS super secret playtest con model. John Longshore, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Minuteman, the Second American Revolution. This, I forget the details on this thing. There was at one point at which I thought there was something interesting about this game, and I don't remember what that was, to be honest. So, I love the backyard. The backyard is just fabulous. What do we got going on? Oh, Jesus. Lee Grant, thank you so much. Did want to derail the topic earlier, but in honor of the shelf behind my head, last week you received a new in the shrink wrap copy of Dead of Winter. Dead of Winter was in print not too long ago and shouldn't be that hard to get. But on the other hand, River of Death took years to get a copy. This is why it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't, it wasn't the $1 million that Mr. Rando Nimrod on eBay wanted either. So I was happy. I think I paid $150 for it, which was, kind of a private deal. So I would, say congratulations on getting River of Death. River of Death is Stones River / Battle of Murfreesboro. That's a very interesting battle. It's Rosecrans versus Bragg, which is always a fun fight. A sometimes good Union commander against a consistently pretty bad Confederate commander, but who nevertheless has pretty competent subordinates, as does Rosecrans in that battle. But that's it's a good battle. Not River of Death, but Dead of Winter specifically is a good game. I think this probably advise against playing the meeting engagement scenario. It's really underdeveloped. Just go right to either some of the smaller scenarios, or go right to Stones River. Canadian Civil War, apparently mentioned in Parliament. Apparently, in Canadian Parliament, of course. This is probably another one of these interesting things that's more of a study than it is a game. But the idea of Canadians fighting each other, which historically has come closer to happening than maybe we Americans realize, is probably a source of amusement. It wasn't a Grail game, but it's just like, man, this thing's never even on eBay, and when it is on eBay, it's like $300 or $400, and I'm not paying that for it. Screw that. So this copy, which came, like I said, it wasn't a contribution, but I believe it is punched. It is punched, neatly clipped with an Oregon Laminations corner rounder, or an equally good corner rounder. And the maps are very attractive here too. The other thing is that this is Chickamauga, which is a battle I'm particularly interested in, and what one of the most fascinating battles of the entire American Civil War, and one might argue, one in which maybe we came the closest to the kind of decisive victory in a single battle that you never really saw in the American Civil War, but you did see in the Age of Napoleon. Dale Brady, thank you so much. Purchasing tickets to ArdCon 23. I don't know about 2023. We'll see. I don't know if I could probably get a big enough game. Okay, so Ostfront is, I think, something like 15 or 16 feet long, and that can technically fit in this room because it's not that wide. It's pretty much 4 maps, and then Crimea dangling off the bottom. That would almost fit in this room. I pretty much have to build a custom table for it. So I don't know if that's happening in the basement or if we get an actual rental space. Worst SPI game, Scrimmage. I think Scrimmage would probably end up at the top of a lot of people's list of worst SPI games. It's just a weird idea. I believe that's a Jim Dunnigan design too. He probably just had a crazy idea. Say, yeah, why not do a football game? Sure, everybody will love that. And it was super easy to find unpunched copies of Scrimmage, by the way. Jeff Beeler asked, who has read Wargame Design 1977? Not me. I think I might have an electronic version of that, but I could be wrong. Okay, so Joe Perez says, so SDI was, I think, simulation design. And if I'm not mistaken, that pretty much was Richard Berg. They did the original version of Dead of Winter as well. And I don't know, it's another one of those intermediate games, and I don't know where it falls into the sort of system evolution between the SPI GBACW and the GMT GBACW. I'm not sure if it's the chit pull thing or not. First Blood is another one of those. I've seen the box, I've handled it, but I haven't. I have never owned the SDI versions of those games. Tank. I think you have to say it that way. You can't say tank. It's Tank. That is the actual name of that game. Dixie. Yeah. So that's it. Look that game up. That's an interesting game. Lakeland, Florida. Oh my God. Although in January, that's not a terrible idea. Most of Florida is very pleasant in January and February. Much of Florida isn't for much of the remainder of the year. I was in Miami in October, and man, it was just fabulous. It was fabulous. But I was also in Orlando in July, and it sucked. I got a heat stroke and spent the whole week shitting myself. Chicago, Jesus, listen to this. Yeah, I don't even know what this is even about. It sounds like a musical starring Catherine Zeta-Jones to me. Could be Cleveland, to be fair. Could be Sandusky, right? We're gonna have if we were to have it, depending on time of year. Which I mean, we're really kind of getting farther ahead on the concept than I'm prepared to go at this time. Yeah, this is actually the case with Three Dog 2. There's not enough scenarios. There's not enough smaller scenarios. There's two. I mean, the big scenarios are all fine, but that presupposes that you want a big scenario to play out the whole battle starting on the second day or whatever. Operation Olympic. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's Invasion of Japan. And somebody, Decision redid this, I think, probably complete overhaul, I would think. So we will, maybe get us demonetized here. But I am not convinced that SPI published this. I know it's listed that way on Board Game Geek, and maybe somebody has a picture of an SPI edition of it, but I haven't seen it. Jim Dunnigan designed in something like 1969 or 1970 a game called Up Against the Wall Motherfucker about student protests on the campus of Columbia University, and which is a thing that was happening around 1969 or 1970. It's not a war game. It's kind of it first appeared like a student newspaper, and I actually feel like the scenario was that they did make an SPI print run of it, but that it wasn't something that went through the distribution chain. Let me put it that way. Not with that title, to say the least. It reminds me of, I'm trying to remember who it was, the Rolling Stones maybe, that had ones, they hated their record label and they had one song that they had to deliver to the record label before they could be free to go to a new label. So the song they delivered was called Cocksucker Blues. So I mean, there were war plans for everybody, right? The one that there was a lot of juice behind was actually War Plan Red, for eventual war with the British, right? And that completely didn't materialize. This is correct. This was published in the student newspaper. My unknown is whether there was some kind of SPI, maybe with or without the SPI name on it, but some kind of later, more professionally produced publication of that game. Again, I've never seen it. I am aware that BGG lists it as having been produced by SPI, but BGG's full of shit about a lot of stuff. So, yeah, this is basically accurate. That's probably true, by the way. World War II, especially back in the days when this kind of thing was getting published, World War II was just a more gameable topic, right? The mechanics that were available at the time did a better job with World War II than they did with World War I, which is why we ended up with such famous duds as Jim Dunnigan's 1914, which I'm told is a very realistic simulation of the drudgery of fighting that campaign out. So Joe says that SPI printed some of them and had them in plain white envelopes. This I find believable, but exactly what the scenario was, I don't know. Ken X or Ken 10 says that the biggest problem with Eastern European place names is not how to pronounce them, it's which language to choose in the first place. Yes, that's completely fair. And exact date can be an issue too, right? With various partitions of Poland having occurred. SPI did a baseball game? Really? I mean, I know they had the annual baseball game between them and Avalon Hill, but I was not aware that they did a baseball game. Actually, I'm not surprised, particularly given that Avalon Hill had a literal whole line of sports games. I mean, if you look in their catalog from the era, there's like 6 pages of sports games. So when does Germany get Königsberg back? They're kind of fucked on that, actually. They're mostly Russians living there now. So I think it's a little too late. Michael Sundborg mentions Wolfpack, which wasn't on the BGG derived list. And I didn't think of it, but I think it's probably worth an honorable mention at least. Richard Berg designing a baseball game for SPI. That's a little bit alternate universe. I mean, that's something that I really kind of like to see. To be honest, as somebody that liked, while Richard Berg had his idiosyncrasies as a designer, certainly, and sometimes he overdid it, certainly. But generally speaking, I think Richard Berg designed a lot of very good games. So how that would be applied to a baseball simulation is a great question, and I am not 100% sure what that would look like. There was an SPI football also 1980. So this is apparently separate from scrimmage, which is pretty early. It's S&T, I don't know, 20 in the 20s, something like that. I mean, I don't know how. Boy, yeah. I mean, if it was 1970, I had a time machine. It was 1978. I could go back to the complete strategist in Manhattan and pick out an SPI game. Assuming I didn't have any SPI games. So what would the Desert Island SPI game, in the SPI edition be? That's a great question. And truthfully, I think the answer for me is probably Napoleon's Last Battles. Because of versatility. You can play the campaign, you can play the individual battles, you can do a lot with that particular box. Close second might be Outreach. I think I haven't played it in years, but I tremendously enjoyed playing Outreach. Yeah, Stalingrad is totally going to cause problems in the future. Joe Perez must have play tested that friggin' football game 15 weeks straight. Wow. That is God, I'd be very curious to see those games, to be honest. Not curious enough to provide somebody with them with actual money. But I'd be very curious to see that. I actually played and enjoyed both Status Pro Baseball and Status Pro Football back in the day from Avalon Hill. Those are games that I have no interest in whatsoever nowadays. I don't even go to baseball games, right? Yes, Battle for Germany is like number 2 or 3. So that's like completely, I've decided those things are outside my wheelhouse. Those kinds of games are still around. ID Jester does quite a bit of content on various sports games. And like I said, Avalon Hill, right to the end, had like a whole line of sports games that were pretty popular enough to fill up a lot of their catalog anyway. So we're going to go until I finish this scotch, which is probably another 2 sips. It would be my estimate. I think we have a minor league baseball team here in Akron. At least we did, but it's been a while since I've been to a minor league baseball game. Minor league baseball is kind of where it's at. If you kind of want to go to that go have that baseball park experience, but don't want to go pay $50 for a shitty seat in the bleachers. minor league baseball is where it's at. So we'll see. We will see. Looking for just kind of backing up into the comments here. Bowl bound. Yeah, okay. That was the one of multiple Avalon Hill college football games. So we did mention To the Greenfields Beyond. To the Greenfields Beyond was number 34 on the list. It's an interesting game. And I think it's worth investigating nowadays. I'm not sure how well it holds up, but I think it is an interesting looking game. It's on a topic and at a scale that we don't really see very much. We don't really see that kind of grand tactical, low level operational World War I stuff all that often. So I'd be curious to see it again. Not curious enough to go spend $200 on a copy, but well, technically it's not Akron. Oh God, Youngstown's even worse, man. We're all in post-industrial wasteland here in Ohio, pretty much. Okay. I didn't realize those two things were related. I mean, I'd heard of pay dirt too. The ones I played were Status Pro football and Status Pro baseball. So I never played the Stratomatic stuff or any of that. I just, I didn't know who those people were. I could go to KB Toys and get Avalon Hill stuff. In a 3-inch box too. The editions of Status Pro baseball and football that I had were in 3-inch Avalon Hill boxes. I think, unless I'm very much mistaken, they were the only games that Avalon Hill released in those kinds of boxes. Title bout. Yeah, that's a good catch as well. Well, Canton is, and that's, kind of over here. I'm not a big fan of Canton. I got in a car accident in Canton one time, and I've held it against the city of Canton ever since. So that's why, well, I don't want to provide legal advice, but let me just say that after the accident, I said, I am never again removing my car from the road to get it out of traffic after an accident. It stays exactly where it is until the cop shows up, because somebody hit me, and when the cop showed up, she lied about it to the cop. And so I got to take the insurance hit. So I'm still sore at Canton about that. I have to meet in Akron to play, or Canton to play scrimmage. Oh my God, scrimmage again! That's something I'd be a little bit curious to see. Is like, it's got an absolutely dire reputation, but is that just because people who are subscribed to Strategy and Tactics magazine, who had gotten this war game in the previous issue, then get this game, this ridiculous football game, and are offended by the presence of this ridiculous thing in their beloved magazine? I mean, that could be part of the problem. I am on the far, Andrew Franca, I'm on the other side of Akron, actually, from Canton. It's as far from Canton as I can be, basically. So Stratomatic's still doing that, right? You can still get the new cards from the Stratomatic people. And again, I am not... copy of Outreach on Noble Knight for $85. Depends on condition. I paid about $50 for mine in the flat, but frankly, I had to wait about 2 years to get a copy that was in decent shape. And I'd prefer a box copy. To this day, I'd prefer a box copy, but I ended up settling for the flat because it was the game I wanted at the price I wanted to pay. And it's the only other game I have in the flat. I hate the flats. They're just shitty storage. It's the only other game I have in the flat is Freddy the Great. I think this would be a great video for somebody to do, but it's probably not going to be me. Would be the games that appeared in Dragon magazine, because a couple of them were actually really good. King of the Tabletop was later released by West End Games as Kings and Things. It's a Tom, is it a Tom Webb design? I think it is. Terrific little game, actually. Had tons of fun with it. I took the magazine apart and stuck the counters to the backs of adhesive tile and played the crap out of that thing. That was a great game. And it wasn't the only example. Every once in a while, Dragon would include a game. So, all right, folks. So what's going on this week? So I don't have a Traveler Tuesday video for tomorrow. I do have an unboxing video for Thursday, which is Crossing the Line from VUCA Simulations. Looks real good. I'd like to get another video out this week, but I'm going to miss tomorrow because I'm going to be doing a lot of driving, and tomorrow just doesn't work for me this particular week, and I didn't get it done over the weekend. Awful Green Things. Yeah, Tom did that as well. Baton Races of Yaz. God, I forgot about that thing. That's another one. Like I said, every year or so, TSR would put a game in the magazine. Yeah, so this is the thing. I mean, I've seen people with dozens of these things, and maybe one or two of them are in nice condition, and both of mine are in pretty nice but not perfect condition. Pretty nice but not perfect is acceptable. A lot of times the condition of the flats is absolutely atrocious. The plastic, the clear plastic cover is bright yellow now because it's aged, it's cracked, it's gross. The glue from the bottom separates, so the cardboard piece falls off. Sometimes the cardboard piece is lost. Mine wasn't, so I was able to glue it together, back together. I just used white glue. Who cares? So, I mean, it's not acid-free material, so there's no sense in using like archival glue. I just use white glue, and it's fine. Eventually, it'll probably have to be reaffixed yet again, and maybe it'll need to be sanded to do that. But I'm never getting rid of it. That copy of Outreach, it's like I said very early in the show, it's one of my top 5 SPI games, and it's a fabulous game that has never been. It's not horrendously. There's a fair bit of bookkeeping, but not too much. And there's nothing else like it. Nobody has even tried to do that kind of game again. So folks with like a lot of flats have problems with storage because the plastic itself is disintegrating. I am happy to, in good condition, $50 is a good price for Outreach, based on what I paid. I think I paid 50 or 60. Mine was in a little better shape when it arrived than I expected it would be. I would check Enterprise Games, and if Don's got a copy, yeah, get it. Yeah, he's good about condition too, as is Noble Knight. So, Unpunched, is it in the flat or the box? They did do a bookcase box of Outreach. I haven't seen it very often, but I have seen it. There, I believe there is a Vassal module for Outreach, on Simpubs, and it might actually be on, the Vassal website now too, since a lot of that stuff came up. Since Decision has decided to be less obnoxious about allowing Vassal modules of old SPI games that they're really not going to do anything with. Yeesh. River of Death, used and punched, $350 on eBay. Not really surprised at that price. I got to tell you, not surprised. So this week, again, I do a couple interviews coming up with some new folks we have not seen on the channel. I really got to get the OCS guys back on the channel, but there's some other stuff that's got to happen first. And right now, we're still clearing out the old place. On Friday, I got the news that due to his bank telling him he was going to need flood insurance, that he was not interested if he had to deal with flood insurance because he thought it was going to be $100 a month, hundreds of dollars a month. I can tell you the flood zoning hasn't changed on that property since 2011, which is before I bought the property, and we're to this day not carrying flood insurance. In fact, our policy says this does not cover floods. If you need flood insurance, contact blah, 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 blah. So I don't know. My bank gave me a hassle about it, but I argued with them, and because the house itself is not in the flood zone, parts of the property are, but the house isn't. So I went and got a quote on my own recognizance for flood insurance, and it turned out that the premiums that I was interpreting as being monthly premiums are in fact annual premiums, which completely changes the dynamic. There's a big difference between $350 a month and $350 annually. So as of Friday, it sounded like he was backing out. As of Sunday, I'd continued talking to him, and I'm saying, "Look, this is what I'm seeing. You guys should talk to your people. Let me know." And it sounds like he's still interested, so it hasn't like 100% fallen through. But as a result, we stayed here and did stuff here this weekend instead of going down to the old place. So the bookcase that wasn't coming this week anyway. I think the solution is I'm going to just take it apart. And then I can get it in this back of the SUV and not have to worry about it. These things are, in fact, a pain in the dick to take apart. Just so we're clear on that. You got to be very careful with them, because if these are just held together with pegs, and the weight of the shelf is stronger than the pegs. So if you just like pull the side off, this will sag and the pegs will snap, and then you're looking at drilling holes out and stuff like that, and it's a giant pain. So not interested in dealing with that. This is true. This is absolutely accurate. But mine did too, and we ended up not. So I don't know what to tell them. Now again, $350 a month is like, well, I don't know, $8 a month or something like that. It's more than that, but it's not, not gonna like blow the margins on the guy that wants to flip the house either. So we will see what happens, and you folks here will be the first to know about it, unless I whine about it on Twitter. I will remind everybody there are links to all the social media sites: Twitter, Facebook. I'm now on TikTok. There's not going to be like content from me on TikTok, but I will, if I have something that can be said in 15 seconds or less, then I might do a TikTok video. I've got a couple, which are just basically pointers to this show so far. So if you're on TikTok, follow me. It's kind of addictive, to be honest, to watch people doing stupid shit in 15-second increments. So again, it's just another outlet. I'm more or less camping the spot. So hopefully everybody has had a great time tonight. I would love to thank everybody who has contributed to support the show tonight. This has been like an absolutely bananas night. So thanks muchly to all those folks who helped, and to everybody who's here, right? I can't say enough, and maybe it sounds phony when I do it, but just showing up supports the show. Okay. If you're here watching, you're supporting the show. If you're commenting on the videos, liking the videos, subscribe to the channel, sharing them on social media, all of those things support the show, and they are much, much, much appreciated. So I'm going to kill it for tonight. I would like to thank once again everybody for coming out. Everybody have a great rest of the night. I will be on the show with Dan on Dan's channel tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We'll see everybody then. Everybody have a great night.